Hello, Dr. Berzin. We're getting ready.
Oh.
I think you're on mute.
Yeah.
There you go.
Have people arrived?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, I can see them in the
Brilliant.
back there.
So I'll do a quick introduction. We're so thrilled to have you here, Dr. Berzin. It's wonderful for you to, make the time to allow us to ask these questions. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Therese, for helping us with setting this up. So Dr. Berzin is a well-renowned Buddhist scholar who, among many other things, has been studying, interpreting, and translating for His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala. With an outstanding grasp of Sanskrit and Tibetan, he has done a tremendous effort to develop and clarify Buddhist terminology to the benefit of many Western teachers and students. As a teacher, Dr. Berzin has traveled extensively, teaching in many countries on various aspects of Buddhist philosophy, psychology, and cosmology. Currently, he lives in Berlin, where he's dedicated himself to teaching regularly and expanding his open-source web archive. It contains numerous texts and materials translated by Dr. Berzin, and I can attest for myself. I have been there many, many times, and it is it's a place where I can get myself lost and never come out. So thank you so much for posting that. It's an incredible resource. I am always there, and I know a lot of others are. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, Max, this thing is trying to record this, and now one of these recording devices has all of a sudden done something really weird. So ask them to try to fix that. Anyway, thank you very much for your kind introduction and your kind words. I'm really thrilled to participate in this. This is actually my first webinar, so I am excited at the possibilities of using some new technology. And also, I too would like to thank everybody who has made this possible. Before I begin, I'd like to figure out with you what would be of most benefit to you. I was mentioning this to a friend who's visiting at the moment, and he was saying, do I really want to do this North Korean style, was how he described it, of just here are the 22 questions, bam, 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 answer, 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 put up a smiley face at the end, bye-bye. Or do you guys want this a little bit more interactive? You make comments, ask further questions in terms of the points that I raise, in which case there's a slight danger that we won't get through all the questions. There's 24 of them. So it really is up to you. What would be most useful?
Give opportunity for people to ask, and
One
from the list and one from the audience.
Oh yeah, that's very organized. That's why he's the director.
Is the word. Okay, either a further question, a follow-up question, or comment or something like that. I mean, let's see how it goes. If it turns out that we're spending 15, 20 minutes on one question, then we need to adjust, okay?
Perfect.
Good. So let me start. First question. Many Westerners are enchanted by the colorful artwork in our gompa, tankas, statues, and the elaborate altars, while others are more comfortable with a simple, plainer setting, such as found in Protestant churches. Do these Tibetan religious objects really have essential spiritual meaning, or are they actually cultural expressions and not essential for Mahayana Buddhist practice? Also, by the way, I should mention that I haven't changed the order of these questions at all, so they're in just whatever order they were on the page. Basically, if you look at Buddhist centers around the world in different Asian cultures, they all have very different types of decorations. It's not just Protestant churches that have a simple setting. You find that also in Zen temples as well. So it really is culturally specific. Now, if you happen to like, all the colorful Tibetan decorations and things, that's fine. There's no objection to that, but it certainly is not necessary at all. And as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, he's not in favor of people spending a tremendous amount of money and time making a very elaborate center or temple, even within the monasteries in India itself. He always says that the main thing is to make it a center of learning, not, a decorated ornament. So up to you guys what you like, but it certainly is not essential at all. If you have paintings of the various figures that you are going to use in visualizations, then of course that helps in familiarizing yourselves with them. But as long as you have some sort of central representation of the Buddha, which can be a very simple thing, or Buddha Dharma Sangha type of thing, or body, mind, and speech of a Buddha, then that's perfectly fine. It's adequate. Anybody have any anything to add to that?
Yep.
So anyway, next one. I've heard that the Tibetan language has very specific meaning that is difficult to translate in other languages. These lost in translation issues sometimes result in misunderstandings of the essential meanings of the teachings. Sometimes the words used in translation introduce undesirable connotations which confuse students or contribute to difficulties in learning, for instance, emptiness. And differences in word choice made by different publishers add to the confusion. It sounds like there is a huge translation challenge that needs to be addressed to preserve the meaning of the teachings. Does Berzin Archives or any other publisher or organization have any projects actively looking to address this? Yes. Short answer. The longer answer is that it is a very complex question. I think there are two aspects that are involved here. One is finding a meaningful translation for a term. And of course, every translator thinks that his or her term is meaningful in the correct translation. And the other is, I think, a serious problem, which is that there are so many different translations for so many of the terms that for a reader, it's incredibly confusing. And you don't really know when two different texts are talking about the same thing, because the terminology used to translate the key terms are different. So we are addressing both of these issues. The first is in terms of, I try to give clear definitions of what the terms actually mean. So we have a glossary. It is not terribly complete, basically because I don't have, there's so much else to do. I don't have a tremendous amount of time to devote to all the technical terms that are used in, on the website. But I have at least given the Tibetan terminology for it. So it has the data that can then be used for making a more extensive glossary. And we are having these terms and definitions translated into other languages. We have an internal glossary tool, which is being revised at the moment and updated, like everything in our whole operation is being updated at the moment. And that is initially for use of the translators, so that in the various teams, we have 21 different language sections so far. And they use that to keep consistency of terminology. And we have, at least on the old website, an English-German glossary and an English-Arabic. I don't remember if the Arabic one is up. I think it is up in the Arabic section that is there. So definitions are extremely important. And of course, different terms are defined differently, not only in the different tenet systems, but also, the same term, like truly established existence or true existence is defined quite differently in the different tenets. In some systems, it actually is correct, and in some tenet systems, it's false. but also the different Tibetan traditions, and within them, the different authors are going to have different definitions. So you have to specify the context with the definition itself. In terms of there being many different translators that are using different terms, what I would like to see in the future as another project of Berzin Archives would be another tool that could be as an app, or it could be as a website as well, which would function like Google Translate. If you're familiar with that, you have two fields, and you put in the terminology, let's say, of one author, and then and you can toggle which author that is, or which book that is, and of that author, and then in the other field, choose what is the equivalent in some other author's terminology that you might be more familiar with. I think that would be a very simple thing technologically to make. What it requires, however, is the various translators having set glossaries, that they use of their terminology, and most of them don't have that, and they would have to implement something like that, and it would have to be correlated in terms of the Tibetan term. So depends on how many people cooperate. Jeffrey Hopkins has cooperated, and we put his terminology in the glossary of our old website. So you find Jeffrey's terms there, but other translators are not as well organized as Jeffrey is. So that's that problem. Do any of you guys have some ideas about how to tackle it? Because I think it's a serious problem. Terminology.
The tool mentioned, that sounds really like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when we'll be able to actually get to that, but there's so many projects that we have in mind, but it certainly is on the list. Okay, then the next one is, as Buddhism becomes more integrated into Western society, how do you think it will change? That's a big question, of course. I think one of the things that His Holiness the Dalai Lama emphasizes is that Buddhism and science are, having a interface in which they are contributing to each other. And so many of the descriptions of tradition that you find in the traditional texts, like Abhidharma, about the earth being flat and square, these sort of things with Mount Meru, he certainly is willing to drop and adopt a more scientific description. And the same thing if you look at cognition theory, the Buddhist texts don't mention the brain at all. And certainly bringing in the physiological side and the function of the brain and hormones and all of that would be something very helpful. So I think Western Buddhism eventually will, it certainly won't be one homogeneous thing, because the West isn't a homogeneous thing, and even within one culture, we find people have different tastes. But those who like a more rational type of approach, as opposed to a strictly devotional, ritualistic approach, I think will bring in and integrate more of scientific discussion with cognition theory, things from quantum physics and so on, if they would be intelligible to the audience. I don't know that it is more or less difficult than Madhyamaka philosophy, but perhaps on the par with something like that. And that, I think, would be a form. Also, I think that what I've found, and one of the reasons why I developed this balanced sensitivity program that I have a book on, it's on the website, is that there are a lot of psychological issues that the traditional Buddhist texts don't even have words or concepts for, like insecurity and insensitivity and low self-esteem and these sort of things, even just nervousness. I mean, there's no exact word for these things, but if you analyze, you find that you can describe it using the Buddhist type of analysis, and it's usually an amalgam of several different mental factors and things that describe such a phenomenon, and being oversensitive or insensitive, for example. So I think that Western Buddhism will need to address these various types of issues, and we try to do that with our new website in terms of looking at keywords that people are searching for in Google to find answers to, like how to deal with anxiety. Well, there is no word for anxiety in Tibetan or in Sanskrit, but you certainly have the suggestions from Buddhism that can deal with that. Buddhism, I think, can, in a Western form, will have both a more, well, as His Holiness says, you can divide out Buddhist science, Buddhist philosophy, and Buddhist religion. So Buddhist religion deals with karma and rebirth and ritual side, so that's fine. There'll be a certain type of audience that likes that, and just as the Tibetans have not imitated the Indian form of these things completely, I mean, certain aspects of it, likewise, I think there'll be some modifications in that way that's practiced in the West, the type of musical instruments or, this type of thing. But in terms of Buddhist science and Buddhist philosophy, so dealing with Buddhist logic, Buddhist analysis of the minds, the whole aspect of emotional intelligence that has evolved from the Buddhist teachings, that's something which can go much more mainstream. So I think that we'll have aspects of Buddhism going more mainstream and aspects of Buddhism that will be more in the religious sphere. What do you guys think? Somebody has a hand raised in the back.
Can you separate Buddhist science from Buddhist religion?
The definitions of Buddhist science and Buddhist religion, did you say?
Yes, can you separate the two?
Right, well, His Holiness divides three: science, philosophy, and religion. So science would have to do with particularly the things like the description, it's hard really to see where you put psychology in there, but the description of the cognition theory of, sense perception, conceptual cognition, imagination, dream cognition, how the various emotions work, all the discussions of the mental factors. This is something which is, has no religious envelope that you could put that into. You also could put in there logic. This is something that His Holiness said can be very helpful even in for lawyers in terms of the type of logic that's used to prove something. And in terms of philosophy, then you have the whole description of reality and how things, how do you establish the existence of things? So, that type of stuff. Science also in terms of the universe, how a universe forms. Is there something before the Big Bang? Do things have infinitely divisible, or is there an ultimately smallest particle, whether, now you call it strings, or does that have parts as well? So there's those type of aspects. Whereas Buddhist religion deals with issues, as I said, like karma, rebirth, and rituals,
But is
different realms of existence.
But is it possible to have a Buddhist scientist who is not also a believer in karma? I'm just trying to understand whether these are discrete practices or ways of studying that can be appropriated by others who are not Buddhists. because it seems to me by using the modifier Buddhist there, you're immediately implying that there is also someone has taken vows or there is a commitment. Is that wrong?
No, I think the word Buddhist is used in that context simply to mean that that's the source of this material.
I see.
And surely there can be a certain overlap. You know, if you look in the theory of karma, you can say, well, how does that correlate with genomes? How does it correlate with a discussion of instincts? You know, do you speak of instincts of certain species and, you know, characteristics of dogs wag their tails when they're happy, humans don't? You know, this type of thing.
Okay.
Right. Next one. Is there a simple, straightforward way to explain the main differences between the schools of Buddhist tenets, Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, Madhyamaka, Satantrika, Madhyamaka, Sangaka, Madhyamaka? A practical guide to understand the differences. Existing commentaries are very difficult to read for newcomers to Buddhism, let alone understand. A more modern presentation might help convey the differences in a way that is more easily accessible and relevant to Dharma practice. That's a tough one. The tenet systems give their own interpretations of many, many different areas. So you would have to have something, you know, in speaking about this, you would have to specify what area are we talking about? Are we talking about reality? You know, this type of thing, how things exist, how you establish that things exist? Are we talking about stages of the path, how you get the various insights? What is gotten rid of at each different stage? Are we talking about cognition theory? There are differences in so many different areas. But I think that for many of us, what seems to be the main thing that we focus on when we look at these tenet systems is their view of reality, how things exist. And you know, I do a weekly class here in Berlin, and it's available podcast, and we're putting it up on SoundCloud for the new website. And it's all been transcribed as well. Actually, Teresa has been helping with editing of these transcripts. And in the we've been doing Lam Rim actually for about 6 or 7 years now, going through Rim once a week in an incredibly way, and in general following Lam Rim Chemo, but not very strictly, except for when we got to the Shamatha and Vipassana sections and going through it line by line. And at a certain point in the Vipassana section, we decided that, or at least I decided that this was really very difficult for everybody to follow in the class. And I took a break from the text. And what I've been doing lately is going through the tenet systems very slowly and looking at their refutation of me. You know, the impossible ways that me exists, that I exist, that a person exists, and trying to demonstrate that you refute a certain level, a certain layer, and you're left with something. You know, let's say with the Vaibhashikas refute, and then the Sautrantikas will come and they'll refute something more from what's left over, and then you see what's left over from that. And then, you know, you get into what the Chittamatras refute, and like that, you get closer and closer. You know, like peeling an onion, narrowing into the Prasangika view. Because if you go straight to the Prasangika view, it often gets trivialized. You know, where is the self? Is it up your nose? Is it under your arm? Is it in your mind? You can't find it. So what? That is not the best way to approach it. You need to approach it in a gradual way. So working on this, also I've been presenting it in terms of how you actually do the meditation at each stage, and what are the implications in terms of dealing with ourself, you know, in a Vaibhashika way. You know, what are the implications of the insight from the Sautrantikas on your daily life, and how does that generate disturbing emotions and so on, if you have this grasping or if you don't have this grasping. So I would hope at the end of this long process, and we're still in the Chittamatrans at the moment, that it might be able to then summarize in an easier way how you actually, you know, the main points of how you actually work with this material. So it's something that I am hoping for, but I think that it's never going to be simple. It's something which is very, very deep and profound.
Great.
Yeah.
Any comments? Any things you'd like to add or ask? Terminology, of course, is key. And the terminology, you have to give the definitions and the implications of the definitions. So that's what I try to do, at least with the terminology that I use.
Dr. Berzin, in hearing your description, it sounded almost like you're taking it by peeling the layers of the onion.
Exactly.
Yeah, that sounds like a great approach.
Yeah, because usually you don't look at what's left over after you have made the refutation. And that's a very important point, because that then becomes the basis for the next refutation. You know, what is projected onto that you have to now get rid of. And there's still some things that are left there. So using this as the, you know, and each of the tenet systems has its own specification of what is over refutation and what is under refutation, which then, you know, don't refute this. You know, the Sautrantikas will say, you know, objective existence, and then the Chitta, you know, because if you do, that's over refutation, and then the Chittamatras, you know, come back and say, well, that's actually under refutation. So, you know, you have to refute that. So it goes on like that, stage by stage. Okay. Then the next one is the 5 ever-functioning mental factors, as described by Dr. Berzin. I guess that's me. Feeling a level of happiness. I don't know. The 5 ever-functioning mental factors, feeling a level of happiness in the 5, can't even read clearly. In the 5 ever-functioning mental factors, feeling a level of happiness on a spectrum of happiness, neutral, and unhappiness is how we experience the ripenings of our karma. Correct. Can we conserve our store of unripened positive karma by purposely refraining from something that would make us feel happy? And if so, is there a benefit in doing so? I don't know, that's pretty weird. In a sense, because, you know, you could avoid, let's say, eating ice cream. I'm quite attached to food, so I always use examples. You could refrain from eating ice cream, which normally makes you happy. So let's say I'm on a diet, but you might feel happy that you're on a diet. So you haven't really, you know, you can refrain from the object, but you can't really refrain from how you experience the object. That's going to come up anyway. And to try to give yourself more suffering so that you don't use up your, you know, positive potential. That, you know, I mean, Buddhism isn't really into this whole martyr trip of doing something like that. I mean, there are many ways of looking at that in a sense. You know, you could say that you don't want to be extravagant and buy, you know, 50 Rolls Royces and, you know, this sort of thing, because that would, you know, even though you had, let's say, the money, sort of the fruits of the positive potential to be able to buy that many cars. But and that you're refraining from it, so that that positive, that money, let's say, could be used for something else. I think that's a different way of looking at it. But in general, of course, it's important not to overindulge yourself, but not necessarily bring on unnecessary suffering just for the sake of suffering. I don't think so. You don't want to avoid suffering in the sense that, when you do Donglen, you want to take on the suffering of others. So you don't want to be afraid of suffering. Like, I don't want to be afraid of dealing with patients who have, a communicable disease. I don't want to deal with dirty people, or dirty situations. So you want to overcome that, be willing to take on suffering and to experience the suffering. And it's important not to be afraid of suffering, because again, that's sort of the me inside of, I don't want to suffer. I don't want to be unhappy. But I don't think we purposely want to block being happy in order to not use up our positive force, I think. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, isn't it such that, your positive karma will ripen? You have to create the conditions for it, but the seeds are there, so you can't really stop from growing. What you can, but it's almost if they will come up. You can't really force them to stay down. It's not always a conscious thing that happens.
Yeah, that was my point.
Yeah.
You can't force them to come down. Even living in, a very simple life on bread and water, you could be very happy.
But at the same time, certainly I have read that you say you have God realm, that eventually expires and you return and you're reborn again. So there's an implication that, and every time that you suffer, well, you are burning through negative karma. So there's a sense in which you can be invited to take on suffering because you are purging yourself of karma, of bad karma from former lives. And the idea of enjoying your good karma suggests also that you might be depleting it.
Well, also, you need to bear in mind that it's not as though you are just sitting and not building up any more karmic potentials in the whole process of enjoying the fruits of previous karmic potentials. You're doing more. And so the point is to build up more and more positive karmic potentials, regardless of what you're experiencing. So whether things are going badly or things are going well, you just continue with your Dharma practice, sort of the basic teachings of how you deal with the 8 worldly feelings, the 8 worldly dharmas.
Yes, I see. Makes sense.
When I hear the question, it sounds to me like there's miserliness in it.
There's what in it?
Miserliness.
Miserliness.
Yes. So there's this belief that there's this limited amount of happiness to be had as opposed to infinite. And instead our view could be that of creating continually the causes and conditions through habituation to positive things by experiencing them, as opposed to this little pool and I use it all up.
Right, that's what I was referring to, that it is an ongoing process of continuing to build up a positive karma, positive karmic force.
But going back to the original question, it seems like the 5 ever-present aspects, mental aspects, are a way to judge and to reflect on what's happening at the moment, from moment to moment, in our consciousness. And they're not, they're just guides to see different types of components there are to our experience in one moment.
Yeah, they're just explaining how it works.
Somebody online is commenting on this question. Wouldn't a bodhisattva disregard whether or not the patient has a communicable disease?
Whether or not what?
Whether or not a patient has a communicable disease, licking the maggots from an open sore.
Well, I mean, yes, if you are a bodhisattva, you're not worried about catching somebody's cold. You do whatever it is that you can for helping them. That's certainly there. And you're willing to get that cold in order to help the other person. You know, I mean, don't they say that a bodhisattva is willing to go to a hell in order to help even one being there? So if you're willing to go to a hell, you're willing to lick a maggot from somebody's sore.
Yeah.
But that is a rather high level of attainment to be able to do that. Very, very difficult. Okay. The next one. I've come across much disdain from high lamas towards Feng Shui, expressing disparaging remarks and likening it to very superstitious and magical thinking rituals. However, Lama Zopa Rinpoche has referred to Feng Shui as an important way for people to improve their lives and help others, and seems to offer advice that is consistent with the Dharma, highlighting Feng Shui as a method to manage conditions that contribute to success and prosperity as well as to problems. What is the basis for High Lama's attitude toward Feng Shui? Is this attitude influenced by the shamanic origins of Tibetan Buddhism? I think it is. You have in Bon, you know, the native Tibetan system, whether you call it shamanic or not, is a point of dispute. But in the Bon system, you have this thing of balancing the elements externally in order to balance the elements internally. So the whole use of the prayer flags in the different colors representing the different elements, and the spinning, you know, the making of a certain web with different colored threads and so on, all of that comes out of the Bon tradition and was adopted by Tibetan Buddhism. So I would think that many people looking at Feng Shui, I mean, it's the Chinese word for wind, water. It has to do with harmonizing the elements. And they would see that as something very similar to the system in Bon. And many of the Tibetan Buddhists sort of look at Bon as the shadow side of Tibetan culture. And without really knowing anything about it, project onto it, you know, this is, you know, horrible and no good. And therefore, they would probably throw Feng Shui onto that as well. You do have certain things in Tibetan astrology, also with directions, you know, which is coming in common from Hindu astrology as to a determination of which direction to start your invasion of a battle. You know, is you know, with the context in which it arises, and many Tibetans are very critical of taking Tibetan astrology quite literally. It's hard to say, really hard to say, because you certainly have various Kalachakra commentaries that deal with astrology, and it certainly was taken fairly seriously. But I always like Kedab J's comment about Tibetan astrology, which is that it doesn't say everything about a person, because otherwise doesn't say everything about karma, because otherwise a human and a dog born at the same place at the same time would experience the same things in their life. And obviously they don't. So I think that these negative comments about Feng Shui are probably colored by these other factors. Okay. The next one. Although there are many monasteries and even nunneries in Asia, in this country there are very few. Why do you think this is, and is it important that we change this situation? I think the main factor is that a monastery or a nunnery is a dependently arising phenomenon. It can only really flourish and thrive in a society that supports it. You know, you have the monks or the nuns going around with begging bowls in Southeast Asian countries, or in Tibet, the society made offerings to the monasteries. But if there's no financial support for it, and the society is in fact even a bit hostile toward it, then it's very, very difficult for these monasteries and nunneries to flourish. It also arises dependently on people finding it beneficial, or realizing the benefit of becoming a monk or a nun. And many people don't really see that. It's not really emphasized in a way or explained in a way that people can really relate to very easily. I think that, and other people have said this as well, that if in the West we could adopt, or let's say within the framework of the Tibetan Buddhist monastic institution, that we could adopt what the Theravadins do, which is a temporary ordination, that you could become a monk or a nun for a short period of time, that this would be something which would be much more appealing. As one of my colleagues have said, you know, if you're given a choice of going in the army or going into a monastery, that would be very nice. Make that choice, you know, for a short period of time. Here in Germany, you had the option of going in the army or doing social service, of, you know, going and visiting old people and helping them, you know, take care of them, visiting them in their homes, or these sort of things, which is actually very nice. So I think there are ways to make the system of monasteries more appealing and accessible to people. But I think that it certainly does have a great benefit. But I don't think that, you know, in terms of giving people the opportunity to really devote their time to study and practice, and not just going there for a free lunch. I don't think that the monasteries necessarily have to follow exactly the Tibetan model, though. We have to find the model that would, or the model of a Catholic monastery either. I think that that also needs to be worked out in terms of what would be more suited to a Western type of approach to things. You know, in terms of, if you look at the Tibetan monasteries, this balance between study, which is done in the debate manner, with memorization coming first, and rituals, and how much, you know, do you want to really, you know, what balance do you want to make of that? And does it need to be completely uniform for the whole monastery, or what? Again, you guys have any opinion on that? Anything that you want to add?
Sounds to me like a combination of priorities within a community, a society, and the lack of, or the need to develop generosity. Both of those pieces are needed.
Yeah, that's what I was hinting at when I said it has to dependently, it must dependently arise on the society that supports it, which means that the society has to see a value in it. And in Tibetan society, I don't know that the variables there are relevant in Western society. The variables there are in traditional Tibet. If you had many sons, many daughters, that the land was not something that could be divided, on and on and on to smaller portions, and so some of them had to go into the monasteries. Also, the monasteries did rituals for the prosperity of the community. Well, Westerners really be into that. I seriously doubt that. Also in India, a lot of poor Tibetans put their young children into the monasteries because they can't really feed them. Also in Tibet, you didn't have lay education. And so if you wanted to have an education, you want to learn how to read, unless you went to one medical school that did that for lay people, or the one school that trained bureaucrats for the government. Aside from that, you wanted to learn how to read and write and so on, you had to go into a monastery. So the function of the monastery is, and why people went into the monastery was quite different. So again, this would have to be defined in a Western sense of what would be relevant to our society. So everything, all comes down to dependent arising, doesn't it? Okay. As Kurukulla says, the main reason for praising the Buddha is because of his teaching on dependent arising. Next question. Many have denounced transcendental meditation as a hoax. Indeed, their business practices are very questionable. Does TM have any real foundation in Buddhist or Hindu yogic traditions worth exploring? What is the most effective Tibetan Buddhist meditation technique that someone wanting to develop a serious meditation practice ought to study? Well, that last one is a different question from the question about transcendental meditation. I must say that I don't know very much about TM, and so it's hard for me to really comment on that. If we say that TM is merely the recitation of a mantra, then, which I don't know, maybe that's an incorrect way of characterizing it, but if we speak about just that, then certainly in Tibetan Buddhist meditation and outside of meditation as well, we have a tremendous amount of repetition of mantras. And this is something which is very, very powerful, actually. My main teacher, Circle Rinpoche, always used to say that there are three most powerful things in the universe: medicine, technology, and mantras. And it took quite a while to figure out why in the world he lumped mantra as being as effective as medicine and technology. But if you really get into the practice of mantra, it really not only protects the mind, which is the literal meaning of the word mantra, that instead of all sorts of crazy thoughts, you have a mantra going on. But if you're doing Om Mani Padme Hum all day long, and not just saying it, but doing it with thoughts of compassion, particularly Donglen, at the same time, then this is an incredible means of really changing your whole experience of your life. And so it is something which is very powerful. So if in TM they're just repeating Om endlessly, it could have a similar type of effect. You have an effect just from the sound of the mantra alone. That's really hard to to say. It certainly has some effect, but the important thing with the mantra is what you're doing with your mind at the same time as what you're doing with your speech. That's about TM and mantra recitation. But what's the most effective Tibetan Buddhist meditation technique for someone wanting to develop a serious meditation practice? What ought they to study? Initially, of course, for Western people, I think that it's very important to quiet down. We don't quiet down. We're multitasking all the time. And, there's so much information coming in, and, even more nowadays with coming in from your Facebook page and your phone, and from all these other things going on at the same time. Even on the TV screen, there are things going on, in all different corners of the screen at the same time, that you really first need to quiet down. And the traditional method for quieting down and sort of relaxing is meditation on the breath. And so this is, I think, one of the reasons why mindfulness has become so popular, is that it really is very beneficial as a start. But I think the important thing is to realize that it's a start. It is, very, very helpful in, as the Tibetans themselves say, to bring the mind to a neutral state. But once it's in a neutral state, then what you want to do with the further meditations is to build up something more constructive and positive on that basis. And so for that, just basic four immeasurables is what you have in all the sadhana practices, everywhere, as being the most basic, fundamental type of thing. Everybody be happy, free from suffering, etc. You all know what they are. So that, I think, is a good way to start. Then you can go to the much more sophisticated type of practices. Okay? And of course, there are many varieties of that you can do in terms of, doesn't have to be necessarily breathing meditation. There are other ways of letting go of, wild thoughts that are going on in your mind, and other ways of developing a warmer heart toward others than the four immeasurables. Like I have in the sensitivity training, seeing that everybody is a human being and has feelings just as I do. And the way that I treat them affects their feelings, the way that they treat and speak to me affects my feelings. So I care about you, I take you seriously, I take your feelings seriously. So that's just another method for developing this warm-heartedness. Okay? Next, now we're up to 9. Just so that you have an idea of how far we're getting. The Berzin Archives website is a wonderful resource. Thank you for putting it together. You're welcome. Are there plans to expand it further, or to get other people involved with it, like a wiki or some collaborative platform, to make it even bigger and better? Well, yes. In the process of a huge project of making an update version of the revised version of the website. The beta version, some of the people have mentioned, this is available at next.berzinarchives.com. But when we actually launch the website for the public, which hopefully will be within a few weeks, then we're renaming it as studybuddhism.com, so that it will appeal to a much wider audience and be more visible on Google with that type of name. And if we look at the old website really specializes in intermediate and advanced material, and is basically used as a resource for answering your questions, wanting to know more detail about things. And what we are doing with the new website is adding a further section which will be specifically targeted for beginners, people who know nothing about Buddhism, who just ask questions. We're doing this based on keyword analysis in Google, search engines. Basic questions: how do you deal with anxiety? What is what is happiness? How to become a happier person? How to deal with anger? What is anger? What is all these sort of things. What is happiness? How to put meaning in life? These much more general questions that, as a beginner, you are interested in, not necessarily as a beginner in Buddhism, but just as a beginner looking for answers to questions in life, looking deeper. And then you have the funnel, which is that Buddhism has a lot to offer, is as ways or strategies for being able to deal with this. We're putting it in very, very short types of articles, because people don't have time to look at things. We are doing copy writing of it, because you have to, if you don't catch people in the first 10 seconds, they bounce out of a website. Any website is competing for time. This is the most important commodity. And there are 3 billion websites that you're competing with for people's time. So you have to catch them very, very quickly. So it's very important how you write your first sentence, for example, on in a particular article. So we are customizing it in that way to appeal to the beginner audience, and also, and then from that, they can be led to, if you want to know something deeper, here's the intermediate section, and if you really want to, find out, then there'll be a smaller part that will go to the advanced section. So making it much more user-friendly in that sense. And also, I think for the future of Buddhism in the West, if you notice that there are very, very few millennials that are, young people in their 20s that are coming to Buddhist centers. And this is for many reasons. But one of it is that Buddhism is not really being presented in a language and in a format that they can relate to. So the new website is completely with an adaptive format. So the way it was designed was mobile first. That this is the main platform, because already over half the people who use the old website are accessing it through mobile devices. And this is the way that people will access information more and more. So it has to, appear properly on the full range of mobile devices, not just on fancy iPhones, but on the cheap ones that people use in Indonesia or these sort of places. So we're making it adaptive in this type of way. Also, you have to have more content-rich material. So we're making videos, guided meditations. We are in the midst of preparing our first animated video, because this also is the type of media that young people are particularly open to and interested in. And in this way, we are broadening what we are trying to do, and also add to not just being a information resource, but also being an educational platform. So we have many, many, many plans and ideas. I have an incredible team here in Berlin that put together a very professional team, developing it, working out a strategy in terms of not only a website. Making a website is only the first step. People have to get access to it. So, a whole social media strategy, a YouTube strategy, etc. So we are really going big time, as they say.
Great.
And then, once we have worked this out with English, and we're starting with just our 5 most popular language sections, and with a small amount of material, then we do and follow an iterative approach, which means that you might notice that with Facebook or BBC or any of these websites, that every week or so there's a tiny little change or a little feature that they have improved based on user testing, so that eventually the thing grows to satisfy more and more needs and weed out things that don't work. So we're following that type of approach as well. And each of the language sections will need its own strategy in terms of, dealing with how people actually use material, what they're looking for, what gets more prominence and so on with each language group. So there's an unbelievable amount of work ahead of us, but I have a young team of millennials to deal with millennials. We're very, very hopeful that the whole thing will be successful. So that's what we're doing. Okay, next. One of the most fundamental Buddhist principles is the law of karma, that we create our own world. Does acceptance of this view lead to spiritual bypassing or blaming the victim rather than helping someone who is suffering? Well, no. I mean, if somebody, obviously, if somebody is going to be helped by us, they have the karma to be helped by us or helped by somebody else. And if they don't have the karma to be helped, even if we help, it's not going to benefit them. So, it's not a matter of saying, well, that's your karma and I'm not going to be involved with that. Excuse me, we're all interconnected and our karmas are all interconnected. So whether we help somebody or we don't help somebody, there's some karmic tendency that is there. Why are we drawn to give money to this beggar but not to that beggar? So there is, karma explains all of that, really. It's not that we can bypass it. And it's not also that you blame somebody for being, for their suffering. That implies that there's one cause of their suffering, which is a truly existent me that, did something wrong, something bad, and therefore they are suffering as a punishment. But somebody's behavior arises dependently on all sorts of causes and conditions, external conditions, the various mental factors and the strengths of the mental factors like anger or naivety, the factors that trigger those things to arise, going to ripen, and how it ripens is going to be affected by the conditions and circumstances as they evolve. And it's certainly not suffering arising from one cause, and certainly not arising from a cause of a truly existent me who is bad and did something wrong. So that whole way of looking at it is faulty. Okay?
So in the last year, Germany has, I think, absorbed something like 1 million refugees.
Right.
If there were a Buddhist in a position of political power, would there be some kind of specifically Buddhist policy response?
Well, I think that Merkel is really acting like a bodhisattva in this situation. She realizes that after World War II, the world was flooded with refugees, and people took them in. And this is something which is very important to do. So I don't know what would be more Buddhist than just opening your doors and giving a welcome. The German economy is so strong that there actually is the money to be able to support these people, to give them housing, to give them basic means of living, food, etc. that they're doing. It's unbelievable. And although you find publicity in newspapers about the skinheads and the neo-Nazis and so on, which you find in almost every society, what they don't report is this massive amount of help that the population has given to these refugees. There's this enormous thing of donating your used clothing that you're not really wearing or anything like that. There are here in Berlin, I think, well over 1,000 people that have volunteered to organize and to teach German to these refugees, because they don't know the language. Many of my students are involved in that. So there's a tremendous wave of generosity from the German people toward these refugees. Now, you could say that that's sort of in a compensation for what happened in the Second World War, but I think the Germans, more than most societies, go, you know, as far as possible away from the model of what happened in the Second World War to help others. And, you know, this is not with any particularly Buddhist agenda as part of it. Really is very, very admirable. And of course, the economic advantage is that with an aging population, you need more workers to pay into the tax system in order to generate the welfare of the state. So it's an intelligent policy.
Thank you.
And the society is particularly in Germany, there's a tremendous amount of Turkish here, particularly in Berlin. It's the second largest Turkish population city after Istanbul. And this was because of after World War II, so many of the men were killed. You didn't have the actual physical labor to be able to rebuild, you know, bombed out West Germany. And so they brought in all these workers from Turkey. And it worked. You know, it's unbelievable when you look at the pictures of, you know, some of these cities. They look like, you know, Hiroshima after the atomic bomb. Okay, so the next one. The Tibetan Tuku system has been criticized by some as unfair and exploitative of the children born into the system. Can you elaborate on the concerns and what is being done, if anything, to address them? That's a rather complex question because you have what's going on in China with the Chinese government saying that they're in charge of the Tibetan Tuku system and they will validate who is actually a Tuku so that they can then indoctrinate the person like they've been doing with their substitute Panchen Lama, and as they hope to do with a substitute Dalai Lama, to get the people to have allegiance to the Communist Party. So that certainly is an exploitation of the children in the Tuku system. And certainly, I mean, there's nothing much that can be done from outside of China to affect that type of policy. The people themselves, the Tibetans, most of them don't accept, you know, the Chinese Panchen Lama. But this is, you know, you have to feel sorry for the poor kid who is, you know, who is the Chinese Panchen Lama and that he's been exploited. And it's certainly not his fault, although one could say, well, that was his karma to be exploited in this type of situation. Now, in traditional Tibetan society, you could also criticize the Tuku system as exploiting the children in order to get economic benefit for your monastery. This is sort of the Marxist interpretation of the Tuku system. You have a very charismatic abbot and got a lot of patrons, and then the abbot dies, and all of a sudden you no longer have people supporting the monastery, so voila, you have a Tuku. The abbot is back, and the people will continue to support with finance and food the monks in the monastery. So that's a rather, as I say, that's the Marxist take on the whole Tuku system, and it certainly has a certain validity in some cases because you find at a certain period in history that all of a sudden there's a mushrooming of the number of Tukus that are there. You know, is it because everybody has all of a sudden reached such a high spiritual level, or are there other factors in terms of the dependent arising of that phenomenon? In India itself, well, depends on what you call exploitation. What I'm thinking of, and this isn't exclusive to the Tukus, but is relevant for the geishis as well. I mean, because I've traveled, as part of the team with at least Circle Rinpoche, and translated for some other lamas when they've been in the West. And they get an unbelievable amount of pressure from their monasteries to get sponsors in order to feed the monks. And this is terrible, the pressure that they have. And when they go back, they have to bring back, a whole bunch of money and sponsors. Otherwise, they get severely criticized. And so this is because of the refugee situation. And you could say that that's a form of exploitation. And this is part of the agenda of these lamas that go out in the West, is to raise money for the monastery. So that is, perhaps you could say that is a form of exploitation. But again, it has arisen dependently on many factors. Everything arises dependently on many factors. What His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said at this Tuku conference that took place, I think it was 1976, or something like that, that I was present as an observer of. And he really scolded these Tukus from all the traditions, came together, saying that you really must not rest on the laurels of your name, of the predecessor and the fame of the predecessor, but that you really need to prove yourself in this lifetime based on your own spiritual accomplishments. And he even advocated that he would love to get rid of the whole Tuku system. But I doubt that that will really happen, because the society is really into it. I don't know what else to say about that. You guys have anything to say about it? It's a huge responsibility being a Tuku. And you could say that there's exploitation in terms of unbelievable expectation and projection on these kids. I mean, it's a horrible pressure that they have, that they are supposed to somehow live up to, what the predecessor did, and follow on that. And you have to realize with a Tuku that the only qualification for being a Tuku is that you really have a very sincere bodhicitta motivation, and you have proficiency, certain level of proficiency in the generation stage of Anuttara Yoga Tantra, in terms of these visualizations with Bardo, death, Bardo, and rebirth, and you make prayers to be found, and you have followers who will look for you. You don't have to have non-conceptual cognition of voidness. You don't have to be any, super highly realized being. So these Tukus have beginningless rebirth. And so an unbelievable amount of both positive and negative potentials. And the ones that are going to ripen in any particular rebirth are going to be different. So they really are, like a different person. You can see certain things are, maybe reminiscent of the previous one, because I've known a couple of Tukus in 2 lifetimes. But, they're really quite different personalities and so on. And they might not be as intelligent as the previous one, or they might, really not be into it in terms of working as a teacher and so on. You find many of them have disrobed, for example. They do things differently. I think that the young Circum Rinpoche's attitude is something which is really very, very exemplary, and I find that very, very inspiring. He says that, whether he is the incarnation of, his predecessor or not, that's impossible to say, although he has admitted that he does have some memories. But nevertheless, what he says is that the only definitive thing that you can say is that he's been born with an unbelievable amount of positive karma, that he was found, he's, personally, he was one of the teachers of the His Holiness the Dalai Lama in his past lifetime, so His Holiness, supervises his education, supervises personally, what he's doing and so on. He's given the best teachers, the best opportunities and so on, and that he feels that he really must take full advantage of it, the basic precious human rebirth that he has, an unbelievable precious human rebirth. And that's about all that you can say definitively about being the Tuku. And therefore, it's up to him to take full advantage of that. I think that's very helpful for even people who are not Tukus. Obviously, it's the basis of the whole Amrim.
Well, I have a question, because it seems like all the Tukus are found within Tibet. I mean, there's no rule that you will be reincarnated in Tibet. I mean, it's there.
Well, no. I mean, there have been quite a number that are found in the West already, and some have been found in Taiwan. It's not limited to the West, certainly among the Mongols, traditionally as well. I think the main thing is whether or not they are going to have the opportunity to be trained. And what will be of, the most benefit. Hard to say, but more and more are found in the West. The problem, of course, is the education. Mm-hmm. Do you give a child, you take a child at, 8 or 10 years old, or even younger, and throw a Western child and throw them into the monastery and have no Western education? What's happened with some of them is that they get to be teenagers and they give up their monastic education. And this is ones who have been thrown in as monks as well, not necessarily as Tukus. They give up their monastic education and then they're out in the world and they can't even do arithmetic. They have no Western education either, so they're really screwed. But His Holiness has introduced basic modern education, Western education into the monastery, so at least they're getting that basic training now. So this is a bit better, but that's a real issue with a Western child who's recognized as a Tuku. When do you, how much Western education and how much Buddhist education do you give the kid? Difficult, very, very difficult. Also, Tibetans are thrilled that their child is a Tuku, and happily give the Tuku to the monastery. Mind you, the Tukus then send back a lot of economic help to the parents and to the family. So it's a great economic benefit for your child to be recognized as a Tuku. Plus, of course, your own status in the society goes up. It's not going to be the case with Western parents. They're very attached to the children and are not at all happy to put them into a monastery. So, difficult, very, very difficult. How do you define exploitation then? The monks want to take the young kid away from a Western family. All right, enough of that question. 12, number 12. How important? We're the halfway mark. Not going to fit all these questions into our 2 hours. How important is it to undertake the study of Buddhist texts and commentaries in order to make progress on the Buddhist path? Well, His Holiness the Dalai Lama says over and over again that we need to study the basic texts of the Nalanda masters. So obviously, in his opinion, this is very, very crucial. And who am I to say something otherwise than that? I think that it is important to study the texts, to see where it comes from, to get it in a clear type of way. When His Holiness says to study the commentaries, he's also talking about the commentaries from the Nalanda tradition, from the Indian masters, from the Tengyur. And this was something that he emphasized at this Tuku conference as well, that the only thing that all the Tibetan traditions have in common is the Indian tradition of Nalanda. Each Tibetan tradition has their own sub-commentaries on how you interpret these various texts, but what they all accept in common are the Indian commentaries. And so this is why I think His Holiness is emphasizing this Nalanda tradition so much is to help overcome sectarianism that you find within the Tibetan community, and which Westerners have taken up with even greater fervor, with a football team mentality of sectarianism. Maybe that's getting a little bit less over time. It used to be really quite severe. I hope it's getting less, but they still find it there. So yes, I think it's important to study the texts. The texts are very difficult, though, and even their commentaries are very difficult. So you need people who actually have a good understanding of them and can explain them. Just to study the text by themselves, just sort of read it off of a website, I think would be quite bewildering. And also, of course, it depends on how well it's translated, and that also is not easy when it comes to many of them. These root texts read like, this is like that because of this and that, and they don't fill in the this and that in the sentence. And that's cool in their system because it's a root text, which means that from it you can give all sorts of different interpretations and meanings. And so it has to be a basis from which all these different understandings can grow. Western people feel very, very uncomfortable with that. But what does it really mean? And especially when we are so concerned with, is the this or that. In some European languages, you have to have the gender of the word this or that. So, is it referring to a masculine word or a feminine word or a neuter word, so that we know how to translate them? Then you get problems. So, root texts, they are important. Then, especially if you think of, what are the root texts? There are things like Shantideva's engaging in bodhisattva behavior, Bodhicharya Vatara, Nagarjuna's letter to a friend. I mean, these are very crucial and important texts. Okay. Next question, I must say, I find very bewildering. It is there a direct correlation between the Chittamatran mind-only school and modern-day holographic principle string theory? I have no idea what that actually is referring to. Are there other parallels between Buddhism and modern science theories that suggest a case of history repeating itself as we remember ancient knowledge that we may have drifted away from over the millennia? Or is this simply a case of science catching up with Buddhism as its ability to observe and describe reality increases? I think that this is what it's saying, is that you have, with a hologram, all the information is there in each atom or molecule or whatever. So you can generate the whole hologram from any of the, all the information is there in each one. So that sounds like, the Avatamsaka Sutra, that, you have a net with mirrors and each mirror reflects every other mirror. So all the information is there in one thing. But, and that, sort of it's generated like that. But that doesn't mean that everything is happening at the same time. You have to get into the whole Buddhist explanation of time. So in any one moment, you have certainly imputed, if you talk about Chittamatra, whatever you are experiencing in one moment, all the content is coming out of one karmic seed. So, okay, all the information is generated out of that one seed. And in that information, you have what's presently happening, what's no longer happening, and what is not yet happening. So not yet happening phenomenon like tomorrow is something which exists, but it's not happening now. So you can impute that there will be a tomorrow. You can impute on today that there will be a tomorrow, but that doesn't mean that tomorrow is happening now. Same thing like you can impute that there was a yesterday, but that's no longer happening. So although you have all the information of all of time, as it were, in each moment, They have a different status. And it's certainly not something that has already happened. No, not already. That is no longer happening, can't happen again. So you couldn't have a repeat of history. It's no longer happening, it's finished. You know, so it's no longer happening forever. You know, the death of Socrates is not going to happen again. I mean, he's dead forever. That type of thing. Okay, next one. I hope that that's some vague idea of what possibly this holographic principal string theory is referring to. All right. Next, I was curious about his thoughts, I guess that means my thoughts, on the state of Buddhism in the West. I attempted to use the Yiddish word oy vey. To describe the situation. I think that there is a big problem with Buddhism in the West, and this is a problem that we are trying to address with our new website, which is that it is not really appealing or attracting to the younger generation. It is speaking to the mostly the hippie generation and people who are, you know, sort of neo-hippie types that are, you know, that were very excited about things, you know, that liked the psychedelic colors of a Tibetan gompa, and, you know, really feel comfortable in something like that, and like all the deities and all this sort of stuff. And younger people, you know, who are on their phone and their Facebook feed all day long, you know, they're not interested in that. And so if Buddhism is going to survive in the West, it has to use skillful means to adopt to different audiences as the audience changes. So this I see as a problem. I find that I was recently at a conference of Tibetan Buddhist translators, and they were still thinking in terms of publishing books as the only media for making their translations available. I was the only person that spoke about the internet, and they're not thinking in terms of, you know, how are people accessing information these days, especially young people. And so it's very important to keep up with what's happening in the world and what's happening with the younger generation. And, you know, the millennials are already starting to have children. And these kids who are, you know, 1.5 years old and using an iPad, I mean, what in the world are they going to be like? And we have to address that type of audience. So this, I think, is a very crucial thing for Tibetan Buddhism, for any type of Buddhism to survive in the West, because things are changing so quickly. It's necessary to adapt to the changes in form and media. Then the other thing that I think is worrisome in terms of Western Buddhism is that it's becoming too fragmented. We have almost every teacher that comes to the West wants to set up their own organization. And so you have, you know, even in one city, 3 or 4 centers, all from, you know, geishas from one monastery even, you know, let alone from different traditions. And it is completely unsustainable to have, you know, 300 brands of Buddhism. Just as in Tibet, eventually, from all the teachers who came and all the monasteries that were established, they came together into you know, 4, I mean, it depends on how you want to count them, let's say 4 major lineages, 4 major traditions that combine various things. I think for Buddhism to survive in the West, we're going to have to come together and not be so fragmented. So this is not very easy to accomplish. Also, I think that we're finding in Western Buddhism a larger, growing proportion of what could be termed, one friend coined this term of homeless Buddhists. In other words, Buddhists that don't really feel affiliated to a particular Dharma center or a particular Dharma tradition, and are just sort of putting it together from what they find on their phone. So that, I think, is something that really has to be taken seriously in terms of how Western Buddhism will evolve, and how you can actually reach and train and educate these homeless Buddhists. So those are some thoughts about the state of Buddhism in the West. As it's going more and more mainstream, you also want to be careful not to totally water it down. You know, one of the things that I'm a little bit concerned about is that it doesn't become merely another form of therapy. There are many therapeutic aspects of Buddhism, but there's much more than that. The thing is that the therapeutic aspects of it are the most appealing to the mainstream. It's not going to be doing tantric rituals with a vajra and bell and drum. So that is perhaps, you know, the wide part of the funnel, but we need to be careful to not reduce Buddhism to only that. You know, there's much, much more to it. But not that many people will be interested in the full thing. And that we need to, you know, accept. That's, of course. Okay. That's a big topic. I'm sure there could be a lot of discussion, but we're already an hour and a half into our meeting. The next one is when engaging in a purification practice, is one actually removing karmas from one's mental continuum? That is, without having to endure their consequences? Or is this a method to reduce one's ignorance relative to a specific karma, such that when the karma arises again, one is better prepared to then purify it and finally resolve it, eliminate it from one's mental continuum, or at least minimize its effect? That's a rather complex question, but I think what needs to be clarified behind it is the whole purification process. If you do, let's say, 100,000 Vajrasattva recitations with the 4 opponents, you know, regret and so on, and you do it with not just blah, 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 the mantras with a lot of mental wandering, but actually you very intensely have, you know, throughout the thing, full concentration and the 4 opponent factors and all of that, which is not so easy at all. But let's say you manage to actually do it properly, then what is described in the text is that you burn the seeds, you know, the karmic tendencies, so that they're not able to actually give the result. Now that doesn't mean that you don't, you know, you're no longer able to build up more negative karma. You are. It just means that you've cleaned the slate from, you know, what you've built up in the past. And then, of course, the debate is, have you purified the mental continuum of every negative karmic potential, you know, from beginningless time, which is a little bit hard to fathom, or just are you focusing on, you know, a specific portion of that? That's really hard to ascertain. But another point of that, so it doesn't guarantee that you're not going to build up more, because there are other types of, you know, if you haven't purified in that process every single negative karmic potential from beginningless time, then of course there's going to still be some negative karmic potential left, which is going to then act as a generator for building up more negative karmic force. The other thing that Tsongkhapa points out in Lamrim Chenmo is that even if you have deactivated and burned these so-called seeds of karma so that they don't ripen into, you know, their actual result of unhappiness and so on, nevertheless, they're still imputable on your mental continuum until you have non-conceptual cognition of voidness. It's only as an Arya that you start to get rid of it. It's not that you get rid of it all at once, but because what they do is, even in their burnt state, they will impede your liberation, from samsara. So they still act, they will make it take longer, more effort to get rid of the emotional obscurations, the ones preventing liberation. So this purification practice, you can't say, does it actually remove karmas from one's mental continuum? It depends on what level of purification you're actually referring to. Okay? Now, of course, we can, as the person was indicating in the question, we could try to avoid circumstances that would trigger the karmic potential from ripening. And so this is indicated in terms of the 12 links of dependent arising, where it talks about how what's usually translated as clinging and grasping, which I translate and explain differently. But anyway, let's not get into a complete discussion of the 12 links. But these two, which have to do with grasping at the happiness or unhappiness, not wanting to be parted from it, from the happiness, or wanting to be parted from the unhappiness, and then grasping for the me who's doing that grasping. These are the things that will activate throwing karma, as described in the 12 links. So you can say that in general, these activate the negative karmic potentials. So one of the things that you want to do is to stop activating them. And to stop activating them, you need to get the non-conceptual cognition of voidness. So, I mean, that's how it actually works, that you get rid of it, because something can only exist as a cause if it is, being a cause arises dependently on there being a result. And if something can no longer give a result, it can no longer can establish its existence as a cause. So, in that sense, you eliminate the negative potential of this so-called seed. Okay, I mean, that's getting a little bit sophisticated in the explanation. I hope that that was a bit understandable. Okay? Next. Is it necessary to meditate in one lineage? Then the person gives all sorts of examples of this. Maybe it's too long to read, but the question that the person has at the end of this this list of different possibilities is: can I look at different interpretations and meditate on these from different teachers to achieve awakening? Is that okay? Depends on what our aim is. If and what you're looking at. His Holiness says, quoting from the 5th Dalai Lama, that it's important not to mix teachings, which means to put many, many things together in a stew. So if you're doing a Dzogchen meditation, you just do the Dzogchen meditation. You don't mix in some Gelugpa things to it. If you're doing a Gelugpa meditation on voidness, you just do that and don't mix in Dzogchen things into that. So there's no problem in doing these things in different sessions, but don't try to put it all together in one type of thing. Now, this can be helpful if your aim is to be a teacher and to be a Buddha, and to be able to answer people's questions who are coming from all different traditions and all different experiences, so you know what they're talking about. That's very helpful. You have to have some idea, especially if you want to overcome sectarianism, that you know what these other systems are talking about and have a little bit taste of what they are, and you can respect them. But you have to bear in mind that especially if you're talking about the view of reality, the correct view of reality, and the way that voidness is discussed and so on, you can say in the end it all comes down to, the same understanding. They're not contradictory. However, there are many points which they very strongly differ in the way that they explain things and approach things. And so it can be very, very confusing if you try to mix those together without, clearly separating them in your mind that, according to this system, it's like this, according to that system, it's like that. And for that reason, particularly in dealing with the view of reality, it's much better to stick with just one system and its presentation of the tenet systems and so on. But when it comes to basic things like quieting down, with basic shamatha, to do that with, because a lot of people like Alan Wallace's approach, which is basically a Dzogchen type of approach. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Wrong isn't the word. There's nothing contradictory with doing that as a supplement to, let's say, if you're doing a Gelugpa-style study of voidness or Lam Rim. This is, just a basis type of thing which can be accepted in common with all traditions, and even working in terms of gaining shamatha on the nature of the mind. That, there's no problem with that on the basic nature of the mind as well. It's when you get into the whole discussion of the reality of, what appears to the mind that it can become quite confusing to try to study both, the Gelugpa system and the Dzogchen system at the same time. What is usually recommended is if you're going to study two things, don't start them at the same time. It's like if you're going to study foreign languages, don't start studying two foreign languages at the same time. Do one at a time so that you get some basis and then start the other. Also, as one of my teachers, Geshe Ngawan Targe, pointed out, one of our faults that is encouraged in our Western educational system is to compare two things, neither of which we know very thoroughly. So, how does the development of modernization process in China compare with the modernization process in Japan? Standard question that was part of, my education in university on Asian studies. So once you understand one system, a good foundation in it, then to look at another system so that you can gain respect for it, appreciate it, answer people's questions, and so on. That's very helpful. So it depends on how we want to put things together. Next, where or how do Yantra Yoga and Dream Yoga fit into the compendium of Tibetan Buddhist teachings? Are there benefits reserved only for those who also engage in Dzogchen teachings and practices, or can anyone benefit from these yoga methods? Well, sure, Yantra Yoga is just another system of basic physical exercises for opening up the channels. You find that in the 6 yogas of Naropa, practiced in Kargyu, practiced in Gelugpa. And Milam Dream Yoga is part of the 6 yogas as well. So none of this is the exclusive domain of one tradition. And can they be helpful? Sure. I mean, you can also do Yantra Yoga as a sport. Is it beneficial to do something as a sport? Well, sure. Why not? It helps with your health. So I think anybody can benefit from these things. The point is your motivation and your goal. Intention, goal, motivation for reaching it, etc., which is what's going to be vital in any type of practice. Okay. I don't think we're going to get to the final end of this, but that's okay. We can do just a few more, because now we have only 10 more minutes. My question related, number 18, we have 24 questions. My question relates more to auspicious numbers requested from lamas to recite particular numbers of mantras I mean, absolutely no disrespect to any of our lamas, but in trying to find explanations for the use of these types of numbers when practicing Dharma, most of what I found seems to explain this use as rooted in early cultural traditions and superstitions, magical thinking, astrology, and numerology. Thus, there is nothing to observe, comprehend, test, or learn. Have I gone wrong somewhere? If so, where? Yeah, that's a tough one. How to be politically correct in answering this. It does seem to be fairly arbitrary of how, you know, you recite something on this day and it's multiplied by this number, but if it's on another day, it's by that number, and reciting this Buddha's name, you get this, you know, number of so-called merit points, and that Buddha's name, you know, you get a different number, and so on. I find that also very, very difficult to understand. I think in general, it, you know, you can take it literally, and some lamas take it literally, or you can take it as just something that arose culturally with a society of, let's say, peasants. You know, that's not a terribly politically correct word, but you know what I mean. Uneducated people who would think that to recite something 100,000 times or 1,000,000 times is totally beyond, you know, my you know, ability, and therefore, if you ask them to do 100,000 of something and they actually do it, then they get this sense of self-confidence, that they're actually able to do something that previously they couldn't conceive of doing. So I think that's one benefit of why these large numbers. Another benefit, and this is purely my own speculation, is that if you think about it and take it fairly literally, that you need to build up 3 countless eons, you know, I like the word zillion, so 3 zillion eons of positive force in order to gain enlightenment. Well, that's an unbelievable amount of number, unbelievable amount, large number. So if you say, well, but if you recite this name, you get 27 million, you know, force of you know, karmic force. You know, it's multiplied 27 million, and this one by 35 million, and so on. I think it gives people a little bit encouragement that maybe they could reach this number of 3 zillion. Whereas if it's, you know, just 1 by 1, you know, it's hopeless. Never reach that number. So I think also it was, it evolved as a skillful method to help give people encouragement in this vast Mahayana context. But that's purely my speculation. I think that it's hard to take them actually literally. I'm wondering, you know, we're nearing the end of our time together for this meeting, if perhaps we should stop here. If you have more questions, or if you have no questions, I can do a few more from this list. But do you have some questions?
Does anybody have any questions you want to ask now?
I think I just have a follow-up on the numbers question.
Yeah.
In addition, you do the 3 mantras, 7 mantras, 21 mantras, 108 mantras, 7 water bowls. There are these numbers that keep coming up. What's the significance of them? I mean, it's sort of, as you start with Buddhism, you just take it as, okay, I'll do that many, but I need to research, but I don't know yet why those numbers.
Well, you know, each of these numbers can be correlated to, you know, 7 water bowls and the 7, you know, the 7 limb prayer, and you know, of course, you can take it, you know, the 7 dwarves, which is
I'll never forget.
reindeer and so on. So it gets a little bit, you know, how far are you going to draw these analogies? In the Pali Canon, you have a whole collection of, you know, texts according to numbers. and you have the things that talk about the 4 this and the 3 that and the 2 that, and you have even Tibetan. I don't know if you call them a dictionary, but like an encyclopedia. That, I mean, I have one here in Tibetan that arranges all these lists. Here's a list of all the 2s and all the 3s and all the 4s, all the way up to 35. So none of the all of the numbers are special, which means that none of the numbers are special, and each of them will correlate to some sort of list. Is there numerology which is involved? Tibetans aren't really into numerology the way the Chinese are. I've never seen that in any Tibetan system. They have astrology, but not numerology.
Thank you.
Right. I mean, in Western numerology, 7 and 11 are quite, cool numbers. But I don't know that that's relevant. That's like saying the 7 dwarves are relevant to the 7 bowls. Anyone else?
I have a quick question, Dr. Berzin.
Yeah.
Assuming that the project of bringing the wisdom of Tibetan Buddhism to the world is a positive and desirable goal, and given the questions you have had about certain problems with regards to that process in the West, do you have a sense of general optimism about that project? And this is kind of a gimme, self-serving question. I mean, it seems like you're perhaps the go-to guy on that project, and I'll just leave that where it is.
To the Gaia project?
No, I'd say you appear to be kind of the go-to guy.
Oh.
In that project of interpolating between the 2 cultures, East and West, with regards to Tibetan Buddhism. Do you feel generally positive about that project? Optimistic?
Yes, I do. I do. I mean, we've seen just with our beta testing that we're getting, the so-called key performance indicators, that people are staying longer on a page, reading it, looking at more pages. People seem to be responding to that. I mean, what we're trying to do is be more directed toward the audience, the users, of what are people actually looking for? What are important issues in people's lives? And if you offer some possible suggestions of what they can do, well, of course, it's up to them to follow it or to accept it or to try it. But the real trick, of course, is making it accessible, which then means, Google optimization. It has to come up on the first page, and, within the first 3 items on a Google search, otherwise nobody looks at them. So, it's I think that using the modern IT, technology, properly. And I think I'm optimistic. I have an incredible team that is really, into the cutting edge of this technology. That it can be, it can be helpful. That somehow it will reach more people. And then again, of course, whether they actually accept it or not is something else. I see myself that originally I imagined myself like a bridge. Shantideva had this prayer, may I be a bridge to help people cross. And I saw myself as being a bridge between Tibetan Buddhist culture, civilization, and Western culture, which meant studying both of them and living with the Tibetans for 29 years and actually learning things from their point of view and making that bridge. But now with my team of young, millennials, that what we're focusing now is making the access ramps to get on the bridge. Because you can have the bridge, but if nobody can get on the bridge, it's not of much help. So how do you make the access for anybody to be able to get on the bridge and see if they really want to cross it? So I'm optimistic. Yeah.
Thank you. Glad to hear it. I am too.
And I hope that more organizations will follow our lead. Maybe there are others that are already doing it. I'm not aware of that.
So given that, do you have ideas about topics of study for young children?
Topics of study for young children. Well, His Holiness has been very involved with this bringing of basic human values and secular ethics into the education system, of teaching kids to resolve conflict by discussion, rather than fighting, showing them, hands-on type of benefits of being generous with each other, helping each other, etc. I don't know the details of the actual program that people have been working on, but they have been working on this quite considerably in several different places, India, and I think Emerson University. I think something's going on in Vancouver. I'm not really up to date on how that whole project has been going on, but it certainly has been going on. Yes, His Holiness says this is really the only hope for the future, is educating young people, bringing a sense of human values and what he calls secular ethics into the education system. Anything else? Well, German precision, it is now exactly 8 o'clock. Brought to you from Germany by... So perhaps we can end here. I want to thank you and everybody who has made this possible, and put a Buddhist twist to it. Whatever understanding, whatever positive forces come from this, may it go further and further and contribute to the enlightenment of everyone.
Dr. Berzin, as well, on behalf of Kurukulla Center, everybody here, and what you've given to us today is amazing. We really appreciate you taking this time and working with us on this little experiment to see how this works. This is new for us as well. So this has been a real treat for us. Thank you so much. And
for me as well, it's always nice to meet new people and do new things. This is a new experiment for me as well, and it's very nice. It works. So let's see what grows from this.
Fantastic. And if I may be a little self-serving, creating a little causes and conditions here, since we were unable to get through the entire list, then perhaps we might be able to finish the list some other time.
Well, you can say, for auspicious reasons, we did not finish the list. Now we're really being Tibetan Buddhists.
Wonderful.
I know.
And as well, thank you so much, Maxim, his help in setting this up. That was really great, very easy to work with, and Marianne. And
thank you. Here's Max. He's very patiently sat. We suffered him to listen. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I have no idea how to shut this.
Stop the broadcast.
Yeah, where's my mouse?